It's silly to be like the Communist Manifesto is definitively woke. That is derivative, simplistic, and I think it shows that James Lindsay has not actually addressed the issue of what wokeness is.
Wait.
Let's start.
This started off so beautifully. It was so perfect. Tim understood that James was wrong and full of shit. Tim was saying a lot of the right things. And now something has happened and we're going back downhill. Tim, did you just say the Communist Manifesto isn't woke? Did he really just say that? He thinks the Communist Manifesto is not inherently woke. I need to hear that again.
It's silly to be like the Communist Manifesto is definitively woke.
It's silly to be like the Communist Manifesto is inherently woke? I have so many of these moments on the internet where I see hope in a content creator. And I get all excited. And especially when it's a content creator that I have been critical of in the past, and all of a sudden they start saying the right thing, and I'm like, are we changing our tune? Do we understand? Do we see? Have we woken up? Listen, man, there's nothing wrong with taking in new information and changing your mind and waking up and evolving your point of view. I am the absolute queen of taking in new information and changing my mind and evolving my point of view based on that new information and based on that thought process and that you know, type of like discernment that you have to go through when you're taking in all of this crazy stuff from this world in which we live in. I had such hope for Tim when we started this video, and now he comes out with the Communist Manifesto is not inherently woke. Let's just, again, I need to, one more time.
The idea that a group may defy one other group in such a way, I don't think makes you woke, okay? It's silly to be like the Communist Manifesto is definitively woke.
It's silly to be like the Communist Manifesto is definitively woke. We were so close. We were so close. You know what this is like? This is like that episode of Socialism Saturday where, do you guys remember when we were watching Sophie Lewis talk about the Jews in Nazi Germany? And Sophie Lewis is an Abolish the Family socialist, and she was talking about how, she was talking about pre-World War II Germany, right? Or like Germany leading up to World War II. And Sophie busts out with, she was like, according to the Nazi propaganda in Germany, Jews were both the communists and the bankers. How could Jews be both the communists and the bankers? And I was like, Sophie, you got so close. She was so close. She was so close to realizing that the Jews play both sides and they're always on both sides. And that's why in Germany, they were both the communists and the bankers because they were on both sides. And that's the way it always is. They're always on both sides. And she was so close. She was right there. I was like, Sophie, just go. Just take that. You need to take 2 extra steps, girl. Just 2 extra steps. And Tim is like right there. Tim is like, James Lindsay is woke and James Lindsay is behaving woke and there is no such thing as this woke right and this is all bullshit. And then he's like, it's silly to think that the Communist Manifesto is definitively woke. No, Tim, no. No. All woke ideology that you consider to be woke leftist ideology, people might call it critical theory. They may know it came from the Frankfurt School. They have some vague semblance of like, you know, critical race theory, anti-racism, gender ideology, queer theory, disability studies, fat studies, abolish the police, campus protests, environmental justice, reproductive justice, etc., etc., etc. All the crazy things that people believe come from the Frankfurt School or critical theory or any of these like insane ideas that, you know, they talk about on college campuses. It all comes from Marxism. All of it. Every single bit of it. The only people pushing this ideology are socialists and communists. It is where it all comes from. So to say that it's stupid to believe that the Communist Manifesto is definitively woke just shows that Tim doesn't know what he's talking about on this issue. I'm sorry. I wanted to be delighted by this video, but we have to face facts that Tim does not understand what he's talking about on this issue. And there's nothing I would love more for him to understand it. I want to be on his side on this, but that's crazy, Tim. Are we really surprised, though? Remember we saw earlier this year how Tim believes woke originated with social media, and Dave Smith believes it's a CIA conspiracy theory. Tim gets even worse from here. Oh, great. I thought we were going to have a good day. Oh, great. Postmodernism comes from Marxism, Tim. Where do you think Marxism comes from? Could it be Karl Marx and the Communist Manifesto?
That is derivative, simplistic, and I think it shows that James Lindsay has not actually addressed the issue of what wokeness is. Let's start here. You may ask me, Tim, what is woke? Think about it for a second. Recently, Jaguar, as the British presenter called it, Jaguar, came out with these ridiculous cars in a cringe commercial where you had a bunch of different people of various racial backgrounds and genders wearing ridiculous clothing in a ridiculous set. And it was called woke by a lot of people. Why? Well, the color scheme they used are the transgender color schemes, the baby blue and the salmon pink or whatever it's called.
Where do you think this comes from?
And the individuals did look strange, often in alignment with how people would perceive non-binary.
Pop quiz. Before Tim even finishes. Pop quiz. What is the origin point for the ideas pushed in the Jaguar commercial? I'm just going to ask my chat. I'm not even going to say it. Pop quiz. What is the origin point for the ideas pushed in the Jaguar commercial? It's queer Marxism, Tim. It's queer anarcho-communism. It was queer Marxism. Emphasis on Marxism, also on queer. It's queer. It's queer. It's queer. Queer comes from Marxism. The goal of queer theory is to liberate people from capitalism. The goal of queer theory is the annihilation of capitalism. That's the Mary Nardini gang. Queer liberation only happens when capitalism is annihilated. That's not an exact quote, but it's pretty effing close. Mary Nardini gang was a queer anarcho-communist group that existed in Milwaukee that wrote some of like the seminal fucking documents that influence all queer activists today. It is all from queer Marxism. Woke didn't come from the internet. It came from actual socialists and actual communists pushing it into higher education, which pushed it into the K through 12 schools. And then they built out from there and they took over every other institution. And it has still taken over higher education, and it has taken over the K through 12 schools to this day. And Tim thinks it came from social media.
Or trans or whatever. That's probably why people called it woke, despite the fact that there's nothing overtly political about it. It was just weird postmodernist art. Copy nothing. And people looked weird. So I don't necessarily think that was woke in my opinion, but a lot of people...
He doesn't think the Jaguar commercial was woke? Bruh.
People did think it was woke. And I think it's fair to say that I understand why on the surface it would appear as such. Wokeness, in my view, can be easily described as cult-like adherence to liberal social orthodoxy.
No, wrong.
And that's why we say
completely
a video game
wrong.
That
to liberal Tim, the people who push these ideas hate liberals. They call it neoliberals. They think liberals are too close to capitalism. Cult-like, Tim's definition of woke is cult-like adherence to liberal social orthodoxy. Bro, oh my god.
Recently, Dragon Age comes out, and there's a character who's like, oh no, I misgendered you. I better do push-ups. It's called pulling a bob.
That's queer Marxism.
And we're like, that's woke. What's woke about it? It's not that someone was gay. There's gays against screamers. There are gay people who are anti-woke. There are trans people who
queer is not about
are anti-woke. So it's not
queer is not about being gay. Queer is not about being trans. You do not need to be gay or trans in order to be queer. You can be a straight cisgendered white man and still be queer, because queer is a far left political ideology that seeks to abolish the gender binary. That means men and women. That's what non-binary means. It means no binary. The reason they seek to abolish the gender binary is because they believe it was created by capitalism. The goal of queer theory is to liberate people from the oppressive force of capitalism, the annihilation of capitalism, to push back against anything normative, the normal, the legitimate, the dominant. That means norms that uphold the capitalist society. One of the norms they want to push back on is gender. That's why non-binary is a thing. That's why they want to abolish gender. That's what the whole freaking Supreme Court hearing was about today. Their whole goal is to abolish the idea of gender entirely. That's why they get rid of gendered language. That's why there's taxpayer funded training in Washington, D.C. telling people that they can't use words like boy and girl and mother and father and brother and sister. That's why there's federally taxpayer-funded training in California for teachers that teach if a student walks into a classroom and writes there are only two genders on the chalkboard, that's considered to be harassment. Non-binary means no binary. It means no men, no women, because they want to abolish the gender binary because they believe it was a construct created by capitalism, which put men in the workplace where they had all the power and all the money, women in the home doing the unpaid labor of raising the next generation of proletarian workers. That is the nuclear family. The nuclear family is really their direct target because if they abolish the gender binary, they're going to abolish the nuclear family, and they believe that the nuclear family is the literal means of reproduction of capitalism via something called social reproduction theory, which says that social systems will reproduce itself until it is abolished. The reason they want to abolish the nuclear family is because it is privatized wealth that is not available to the collective, and it is the reproduction of capitalism because the children in the nuclear families are raised with capitalist values, thus reproducing capitalism because they haven't attained the class consciousness to know that they are all oppressed by capitalism. So if you disrupt the nuclear family, you disrupt the reproduction of capitalism. That gives them their communist society. That is the goal of queer. They say this openly in their trainings. We have it all on video, 19 Ways from Sunday. So why doesn't Tim know this? Oh, right, because Tim blocked me on Twitter because he convinced himself I was an SJW when in fact I was the exact opposite of that. And he didn't look at what was being given to him, and thus as it is. Thus, Tim has no idea what he's talking about. Has no idea where any of this stuff comes from. No idea. Because these people don't look at evidence. These people don't research anything they're talking about, and this is the problem. This is why we will ultimately lose to the left. It's not because James Lindsay is an intellectually dishonest asshole, even though he is. It's not that Konstantin Kisin and Colin Wright aren't intellectually dishonest assholes, because they are. It's also that people like Tim, who are calling out the intellectually dishonest assholes, don't know what they're talking about either. Because they refuse to look. All of the evidence is out there for free on the internet. No one looks at it. No one listens to it. They are telling us what they are doing. Why don't these people pay attention? Don't worry. Don't worry. I'll do it. No one else wants to do it? I'll do it. Fine. You can find all this information over on my Substack, which is Karlyn, KARLYN.substack.com. I stream Monday through Friday at 5 p.m. on YouTube, on Rumble, on X, the platform formerly known as Twitter. I stream on Saturdays at 6 p.m. We do Socialism Saturday, where we show people the real far left, the most dystopian left, the people who are driving all these ideas. And guess what, Tim? They're all fucking socialists and communists.
Not that it was trans. What was it? It was the cult-like adherence to social orthodoxy. Nobody's going to really care if in a game you can, like, look at Baldur's Gate. In Baldur's Gate, nobody said, this game is too woke for me, despite the fact you can make male characters with female pronouns. It wasn't ham-fisted and forced. It was an option, and people went, I guess it's kind of woke to have that in there, because it's a weird element of this critical intersectional theory. But typically things are called woke when they reach a level of cult-like adherence to social orthodoxy. I will stress that again. In Baldur's Gate 3, which came out last year and was like the best game released in a long time, epic game, by the way, you can make a...
What Tim is talking about is like 5 levels removed from where woke ideology comes from. Woke ideology comes from the radical revolutionary far left, the communists, the socialists, the activists, the academics, the authors. Then it gets trickled down into all these other institutions via the schools until it gets pretty watered down, to be honest, from where it started from and what they actually want. And that is what Tim is talking about. Tim is talking about the trickle down, watered down version of woke that shows up in video games. I'm not suggesting that's not important. I'm not suggesting that people shouldn't be paying attention to that. What I am suggesting is if you get rid of the watered down version of woke, which is usually DEI, by the way, this is basically DEI. This is DEI training. This is like diversity stuff and culture that shows up in video games and TV shows and movies and stuff like that. It's the trickle down, watered down version. If you get rid of all DEI, That does nothing to root out the problem, because the real problem is up here. The problem up here is causing all the problems down here. If you get rid of all the problems down here, you still have the big problem up here. It doesn't go away just because you got rid of all the problems down here. Does everyone understand this? What Tim is talking about is not the core of the problem. It is the trickle-down impact of the problem. If you get rid of the trickle-down impact, that doesn't mean the problem has gone away. It just changes into something else. That is just as inconvenient, if not worse, than what you were already getting. DEI is not going to go away. I don't care how much Donald Trump says he's banning DEI. I don't give an F. They might ban the acronym DEI. They might stop talking about diversity, equity, inclusion, and belonging, or JEDI, or whatever they're calling it now. They're just going to change the name and call it something else. We know this because they've done it a million times before. When critical race theory started getting a bad reputation back in 2021, they changed it to culturally responsive teaching. They didn't even change the acronym. They went from doing critical race theory to culturally responsive teaching. And everyone just let it go. Guys, we got rid of critical race theory, we won. No, you didn't. They just called it something else. And they do this over and over and over and over and over again. They just change the name and they still do it anyway because you haven't fixed the root of the problem. You just got rid of the little trickle-down manifestation of the problem.